Looking to make some healthier habits this holiday season? Make sure to check out our Moving Through Midlife community over on Facebook, as we are doing a Planksgiving event where we are doing daily plank workouts. We will be doing an Advent for healthy, happy hips this holiday season, and then also have a sugar challenge, a 2-week sugar challenge that you might be interested in. Happy holidays!
Welcome to Raising Healthy Humans, where you as a busy mom can come each week to find information on health and wellness for your family. Enjoy experts discussing tips to help raise children through each phase of life. Gather current information on nutrition and wellness. And listen to Courtney, a personal trainer and founder of FormFit, to provide you with movement and posture tips along the way. It's our goal to help provide you with the information you need to help raise healthy humans.
Today, I had the privilege to speak with Elizabeth Yarnell. She is a natural health expert, a TEDx speaker. She also invented a cooking method and created a unique cookbook which won her some awards, and is focused on the ways chronic inflammation influences our bodies and lives. She now runs a nationwide food sensitivity clinic designed to customize anti-inflammatory diets and helping those with autoimmune issues. And I think her information is actually very valuable for all of us, as we all probably deal with some sort of inflammation in regards to the foods we eat. So I hope you enjoy this.
My name is Elizabeth Yarnell, and I am a traditional naturopath and a certified LEAP therapist. So my focus, I am hyper focused on dietary and other natural interventions, or protocols, I call them, that help people that empower people to reclaim their health naturally and themselves.
Perfect. And you, what is your business name? Is it
really, it's just under Elizabeth Yarnell. And if you go to elizabethyarnell.com, that's where you'll find it.
Okay. And what got you started with this journey of naturopath?
So my journey really started in 1999 when I went to sleep as usual, and I awoke the next morning blind in my right eye. And in short order, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And at that time, when I saw my MS doctors, they told me MS is an autoimmune disease. It's characterized by chronic inflammation, really surrounding the nervous system. And when the nerves are inflamed, they start to misfire, and that manifests in disabilities or other disruptions of our ability to control our body. Something like, I just saw a figure of about 1 million Americans are now afflicted with multiple sclerosis. So it's very much more common than it once was, and especially more common than it was when I was diagnosed in 1999. But the scariest thing I learned after my diagnosis was 80% of MS patients will experience significant disability within 10 years of diagnosis. So here I was 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, looking at spending my 40th birthday in a wheelchair. So when I asked my MS doctors, well, what can I do to make this better? They said, there's really nothing you can do. There's some injectable drugs. They really have low efficacy rates and pretty toxic side effects, but you can try them. And we highly recommend that you do, even though like 20% of an efficacy rate of even slowing progression of the disease. And I did try the drugs, and I did experience some pretty severe side effects and was not slowing my progression of the disease. At this time, it was my then fiance, now my husband of 20 some years, who suggested that, maybe my diet might have something to do with it. Mm. And I had to admit that he might have a point, because really during the whole decade of my 20s, I lived on my own. I had my own apartment. I was a girl on the go. I either ate fast food or at a restaurant, or just skipped the meal. The only staple foods I kept in my apartment were Crystal Light, Diet Coke, and gummy bears. Oh. So maybe not that much of a surprise that after a decade of that, my body would completely collapse on me. But I thought, okay, maybe he has a point. He was a competitive athlete. He was into organic foods. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know anything about these things. So I started studying, and I looked at like the ADA and the Mayo Clinic and all these respected sources. And really what I felt like it all came down to was that whole foods are better than processed foods. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, well, I can follow a whole foods-based diet if that means I'm going to stay out there. But I didn't know how to cook. So I started taking cooking classes and watching the Food Network. This was when it was in its infancy. And great. Then one night, then what I pretty quickly discovered was that preparing all my foods from scratch and following a whole foods-based diet was just incredibly time and labor intensive. And fatigue is a hallmark of MS. So I was just really tired, and it was hard to maintain this whole foods-based diet, even though I knew it was better for me. And I was feeling better as I followed it. So then one night I went to, my husband and I were watching late night TV, and there was this infomercial on. This is in the days before we could afford cable TV. Nobody remembers those. We only had 4 channels. And and this guy comes up on TV and he says, look, I can make your whole meal in this one countertop appliance. And he takes a can of tomatoes and dried rice, and then he puts a metal grill over it, like a barbecue grill type grate. Then he puts chicken breast on top of that grate, and then another metal grate, and then brownies on top of that. Covers the whole thing with a dome, plugs it in, and turns it on. It's very I Dream of Jeannie. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I want to be able to make my whole meal in one utensil, but I don't have that countertop appliance. I don't have those metal grates, and I really don't care about the brownies. And so I went over to my oven, and I thought, I bet that countertop appliance is pretty hot. Looks like that food cooks pretty quickly. So I cranked up my oven to 450 degrees. And now, if any of your listeners are actual cooks, they might start laughing, because the only things you cook at 450 degrees are like pizza and bread. But I didn't know any better. I wanted to cook dinner. And in fact, that day, I went over to my freezer and I had some frozen fish fillets that I put into my cast iron Dutch oven, and some vegetables and some herbs. And then I put the lid on it, closed it up, put it into the oven. And in about half an hour, it just started to smell like dinner. And that's how I became an accidental inventor of a cooking method. And in fact, I even got a patent for this cooking method. And a couple of years later, I wrote a cookbook and introduced it and teach people how to use it. My cookbook is called, see behind my shoulder here, Glorious One Pot Meals. And it just introduces this method of cooking quick, easy, and healthy meals that are ready in about 45 minutes. So that became a driving force for me. And the cookbook is still selling. The second edition was published in 2009. And I think I've sold more than 60,000 copies so far. Oh, wow. So it's still popular and still selling. And it's really a revolutionary method to have in your tool belt for cooking and for eating healthy meals. And I love it for kids and parents, because I made all my kids' baby food out of my Glorious One Pot Meal. I had a little baby food grinder. It just cooks whole foods. And so it was wonderful to be able to feed my kids what we were eating. They were all whole foods anyway. And my kids, as a result, became very adventurous eaters and very accepting. And they are not picky in the least. And they love different types of foods. And we eat at restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And they're really, I guess I would call them foodies in many ways. Because very early on in their very first foods, they were eating things like rosemary chicken, or things that I pulled out of my Glorious One Pot Meal, and the rest of the family was eating as well. So I went along for a while really thinking that the answer to multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune issues was really as simple as whole foods are better than processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is foundational. But I couldn't figure out why my oldest child was still so sick, even though, again, I made all of his foods organic and whole foods, and I did all of them myself. But he was still sick. He would vomit like 7 to 20 times a week. And he had, on top of that, terrible constipation. Sometimes he would go 10 days between bowel movements.
Oh my goodness.
He couldn't sleep through the night. He had overwhelming acid reflux and GERD, and it would wake him every hour in the night. We took him to pediatric GI clinics. We took him to get his DNA mapped. We even had abdominal x-rays done, and nothing could tell us what was going on with him. And finally, I took him to a naturopath, and she said, I really think this sounds like food sensitivities. And I said, well, he does anaphylaxis or hives. And she said, well, those are food allergies. She said, I'm talking about food sensitivities that cause inflammation in the body. Mm-hmm. And I said, we'll do whatever it takes. I'm so worried about my child. He's going to die young. He doesn't poop. He vomits. At this point, he had fallen off the height and weight charts. He was 6 years old. Ugh. And so we tried this food sensitivity test, and it was amazing. Really, 1/3 of the items that were tested, he came back reactive to. It was, now I've done this test with hundreds and hundreds of clients, and his is still the worst I've ever seen. But as soon as we changed his diet, it was amazing. Within 2 months, he gained 10 pounds. He grew 1.5 inches. He stopped having tantrums. He started sleeping through the night. He was much happier. Like, all of these things came up just from changing his diet. And so I thought, when I finish my degree, this is really what I want to do with my life, is I want to design this customized anti-inflammatory diets for people based on this particular test, which is called the MRT, the mediator release test, which is really the gold standard in food sensitivity testing. Food sensitivity tests that look for antibodies are worthless. Don't waste your money on those. And those are the ones that you can get through the mail and do yourself and things like that. Completely worthless. So once I realized the potential of this test, and I started working with it with clients, especially with people with multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune issues, I realized that MS is, if you ask any MS doctor, they will tell you that MS happens when a subset of white blood cells called T cells go rogue, and they start reacting with the inflammatory response for no reason. And in fact, that's kind of the definition of what we consider to be autoimmune, right? Autoimmune, you're allergic to yourself. But honestly, evolution says, that's not possible. If you were allergic to yourself, you would have died out from evolution. Okay. So what I realized was that those of us with autoimmune issues, we're not allergic to ourselves. There are things in our environment that are triggering us, and our medical community really just isn't looking in the right places to find them. And so the centerpiece of my program is this customized anti-inflammatory protocol, where we design a dietary therapy based scientifically on what's inflammatory for you. Like, for instance, one of my most inflammatory foods is lettuce. You would think, what could be more innocuous than lettuce? But when I have lettuce, especially when I have lettuce together with another inflammatory food for me, like avocados, then I manifest MS symptoms. And if I stay away from my reactive foods, I no longer have MS symptoms. So I really think that where we're missing with addressing things like MS in our world is that this is really a customized endeavor, that MS is a snowflake disease. Every person is different in how it manifests, but also every person is unique in their gut and what they react to. I have tested twins, and their test results have come back polar opposites of what each of them are reactive to. I think it has a lot to do with your environment and your history, but also the last piece is really hidden parasitic infestation. And this is where kind of I diverge from mainstream medicine in many ways, because I really think hidden parasitic infestation is at the root of so many chronic illnesses in our world. And the CDC believes 7 out of 10 people are carrying around parasites, and we don't even look for them. We don't think about them. None of our doctors ask us even if we've had any of the indications that we might have picked up parasites. But it is just super, super easy to pick up parasites. You can get them from travel abroad or in undeveloped places, or you can get them from eating sushi or undercooked pork, or you can get them from unwashed produce. I picked up parasites once from a salad bar in a Pizza Hut. So you can get them anywhere, from swimming in a lake or river, or even a chlorinated swimming pool or water park. You can get them from playing with your pets, your dog or your cat, from changing the litter box. I just saw a statistic recently that suggested that 60 million people are carrying around the parasite T. gondii in their brains, and that comes from cat poop.
Gosh. Okay.
So I know I've just been talking nonstop, and I want to pause and
so
where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, no, I have so many things that I want to unpack with you. Okay, so the first question I have is in regards to your cookbook and your methodology. Is there a product, or is it just the way that you go about cooking for your cookbook, the one pot?
Glorious one pot meals.
Yes.
So you need to use a cast iron Dutch oven.
Okay.
That's the only requirement.
Okay.
So there's lots and lots of brands of cast iron Dutch oven. I do not have my own brand.
Okay.
Some are more expensive, some are more reasonably priced. That's the only important thing. And the reason for that is because cast iron has unique heat conduction properties that no other material has. You don't get the same heat conduction with porcelain or with ceramic or with stainless steel or copper. Completely different. And that's really the key to how this works.
Okay. I was curious about that. And then in regards to the MRT, that's a blood test, I'm guessing?
It is. It's a single blood draw.
Okay.
And I work with anyone in North America. The criteria is you have to be able to send a FedEx overnight with your blood to the lab in Florida.
Okay. So I have heard people talk about allergies. My son has allergies, and we'll go into that a little bit. But what I have heard, and I want you to explain maybe how MRT is different, is people will say, like, when you get blood tests, your child may show up with sensitivities to certain foods, and these are usually the foods that they are eating most often. Thoughts on that? Because, that made sense to me. Okay, maybe, you get to a point where you start to eat the same thing over and over and over, and you create a sensitivity to that. Is that what the MRT? No. Okay. I want to hear.
But that's such a good
is.
question. Those are antibody tests. So in order to have antibodies, you have to have a fairly recent exposure to something.
Okay.
So for instance, if you were to go and ask your doctor for a celiac test, they would say, okay, we'll give you the celiac test, but you have to eat bread for 2 weeks leading up to this. Because if you haven't been eating bread for a year, it's not going to show up. Okay. Because you haven't been eating it.
Right.
So the only way to get a celiac test is to have been eating wheat.
Okay.
That's because that's an antibody test. The MRT is a mediator release test. The most famous mediator we all know is histamine. We know that if we have, say, a bee sting or a poison ivy encounter, and we take an antihistamine like Benadryl, that we can get some relief from the pain, from the swelling from that encounter. But histamine is only one of 80 or more mediators that can be released by the bloodstream upon exposure to what it deems to be a threat. Okay. So when we look at the mediator release test, that test is looking at what items, and it tests 150 foods and 20 or so chemicals that are in our food supply. Which ones of these trigger your blood, only you, not like mass population, your blood, to release these mediators. And these mediators, just like histamine does, they all cause inflammation in the body. And they're systemic. They go everywhere the blood goes.
Okay.
So they can show up anywhere. It matters less how the inflammation manifests and more that there's inflammation there. So if we look at, well, inflammation in the head could be headaches or migraines. Inflammation in the sinuses could be chronic sinus infections or runny or dripping noses all the time. Inflammation in the chest could be asthma. It could be high blood pressure. It could be a rapid heartbeat. Could be all sorts of things like this, breathing issues, heart issues, blood pressure. Inflammation in the gut could be stomach cramps. It could be acid reflux. It could be a lot of gas or bloating. Inflammation in the bowels could be constipation, could be diarrhea, could be really either one of those. Okay. We just kind of group them all together and call them dysfunctional bowels. Inflammation in the joints could be arthritis. It could be fibromyalgia. All these things are inflammation. And so if we ignore the diagnosis and don't really pay attention to focusing on, well, where is this inflammation? And just recognize that there is inflammation there and address that inflammation at its root cause, we can really help remove the symptoms. Because if most, if not all symptoms are due to inflammation and we take out the triggers that are causing that inflammation, then those symptoms go away.
Okay. And then what you do once you have the MRT, you find out all of our sensitivities, and then you create a food protocol of what we are going to then eat.
It's a dietary therapy. Yes.
Okay.
So when I get the results back from the MRT, instead of saying, you know what, A, B, and C turned up high on your test, go and avoid A, B, and C. And you're like, oh my gosh, what should I eat? That's like, no, I don't even know what to eat. Instead of that, we look at X, Y, and Z at the bottom, the least reactive foods for you. And we design a customized dietary plan for you based on the foods that we know are not reactive. So I spend a ton of time with everyone I work with talking about recipes and meal ideas and cooking techniques and where to shop for these things. So if we say, okay, you know what, rice is low on your list and we're going to include that in your safe diet, but let's look at all the ways you can eat rice. There's rice milk, there's rice pasta, there's rice crackers, there's rice cakes, there's regular rice, there's rice porridge, which is congee, there's puffed rice cereals like what's the word? Rice Krispies. So there's all these different ways that we can make these foods, use these foods to create a diet where you don't feel deprived. Okay. And you feel we create cookies and cakes and I encourage everyone to do some baking and do some experimenting, because nothing's going to be weird foods. It's just going to be the foods that are not inflammatory for you.
Okay. Now, once you start eating this way, does it change? Maybe are you able to then get rid of the parasites in your body? And does it change? Like if we did an MRT test a year from now, is that going to be different or is it always the same?
So there are two parts to that question.
Okay.
The first is parasites, and no, diets won't change your parasite status. The goal of a parasite is to find a host, move in, set up residence, and multiply forevermore.
So we can never get rid of our parasites?
You can absolutely, but you have to address them directly. And we do that with an herbal protocol. You can't do it through diet.
Okay.
We use an herbal protocol that doesn't damage the rest of your microbiome so that you still have the good probiotics and things that you need for digestion in your gut. Whereas if you were to take a pharmaceutical solution for parasites, you wipe out everything and you become like an eggshell. It's tough to recover from that. But so yes, that is the first step in the approach that I use with all my clients is let's get rid of the buggers, because as long as there are parasites there, there's only so much better you can ever get.
Okay. And
so the second, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, so are there tests for the parasites? How do you determine what parasites you may have?
So unfortunately, parasite testing is notorious for false negatives. So I don't even waste time on tests. Some parasites live in the bowels, and you might find them in a stool test, but so many others live in other parts of the body. They could live in the heart, they could live in the lungs, in the brain, in the bloodstream, in the muscles tissue. So testing is irrelevant, I think. I just really use or encourage everyone to start off and clear out any buggers that might be in there.
Okay.
And oftentimes I can tell they have, from talking to them and taking their health history, what is going on, and that there's parasites at the bottom of it.
Okay. And then the second part. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm trying to remember, what was the second part?
The second part had to do with, if we test a year from now, will that be different? Yeah.
Yes. So absolutely. Food sensitivities change. And so even if something turns up red reactive on your test, very, very reactive to your body, it doesn't mean that you'll never be able to eat that thing again. You might be able to. The more we heal our gut, the higher all of our tolerance thresholds will rise. So some things might never come back and other things will. So for instance, my son, when I first tested him, he had 41 items that were red or yellow on the test. That means very reactive for him. When I tested him again 7 years later, he only had, I think, 13 items. And of those 13, only like half of them were the same as the original test.
Okay. And as you were saying this, I'm thinking, do you think this has to do somewhat with gut permeability, or you feel it's a lot to do with parasites, or a little bit of both?
So parasites cause gut permeability, right?
Okay.
Because, so I used to think that my little colony of buggers were promenading very genteelly through the broad avenues of my intestines, kind of like a Bridgerton episode. But really what it is instead, it's more like one of those ant farms behind glass that we had in kindergarten, where they just burrow wherever they want to through your tissues. So you end up perforated and pocked and scarred, and that is a big contributor to leaky gut.
Okay.
So we address the leaky gut too. I use a 24-hour urine test to tell me what's going on in the digestive tract. We know that 80% or more of our immunity is based in our digestive tract. And so we have to figure out where the damage is and how to help support digestion in order to accommodate that damage while it heals.
Okay. Are there signs? So whether it be for ourselves or our children, are there certain signs that we should be looking for that may identify that we may be dealing with some of these issues?
So oftentimes people ask me these things like, how do I know if I have parasites? Well, one of the key clues is sudden onset. If one day you were fine and the next day, now you had diarrhea or constipation, or now you have stomach cramps, and I used to be okay, but I just can't get better. Or maybe you had like a 24-hour stomach bug that you called it, or this was a 24-hour flu or food poisoning. That often is a source of infection of that when it first started. But other things that can be indications of parasitic infestation can be things like chronic constipation or chronic diarrhea, either one of those, or alternating both of those. Stomach aches, stomach cramps, could be fatigue, headaches. People with parasites often wake up at 3 a.m. because parasites tend to be active in the middle of the night.
Gross.
It's true. They're all over. And honestly, we haven't even probably identified a fraction of the parasites that are in our world. So if you are having ongoing symptoms and you just can't get a hold of your health, no matter what you're trying to do, it's time to think about maybe you have parasites.
Okay. And you mentioned MS, but this is really for any type of autoimmunity.
Really, anybody who has chronic issues, whether or not you've received a diagnosis of autoimmunity, it doesn't matter.
Right. And not even chronic issues. It might be things just starting, I'm assuming, because that will lead to the chronic issues.
Yes. So for instance, I had one family who came to me. They had been to a water park, the whole family, the father, the mother, and the 2 kids. And And ever since they came back from the water park, they had all had diarrhea. That's a very good clue.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have my son, he has a corn allergy. And we found this out. This was very interesting. He presented like celiac. So he had dermatitis herpetiformis on his skin. And first it started out, it's eczema, topical, steroids, that type of thing.
Right.
And then I wanted to dig a little bit deeper because it was not going away. And I started looking at the foods that he was eating, and we thought it was gluten because once I started looking at dermatitis herpetiformis, it came up with celiac. And so we went and had him tested for celiac, no celiac, nothing. We did a skin test on him, and he tested positive for corn. And lo and behold, we pulled corn. And of course, during this whole thinking it was gluten, what were we doing? Just like giving him corn and rice constantly, which was exacerbating all of these issues. And then lo and behold, this corn allergy, he showed up on his skin, and we pulled the corn, and what a world of difference.
Absolutely.
But I would love to have him tested. I mean, goodness, I feel like everybody needs to have this test because, like you said, so many people present differently and different food sensitivities. Like, I'm just thinking of everybody. My mom always comments that she just can't eat lettuce. And I was like, what is wrong? Like, why can't you eat lettuce? And she says, my stomach hurts. It's terrible. So when you mentioned that you have issues with lettuce, I thought, oh, okay. She's not just telling me that because she doesn't want to eat a salad.
Right. Like I can eat spinach and kale and arugula, but I can't eat lettuce.
Right. Well, and it lets you also see that what we get into these, what's healthy and what's best. And, everybody should be eating more kale, but we really need to look at it more individualized.
Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And the same thing with your son, right? So with celiac too, we're lucky we live in a time that finally the medical community and the mainstream public is accepting that some people have a problem with wheat. Mm-hmm. For many centuries, nobody thought that was possible. In fact, when Dr. Alessia Fasano first presented at a medical meeting about 30 years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, that he had discovered that a wheat issue with gluten was at the root of celiac disease, he was literally laughed off the stage at the medical conference because all the doctors were like, food doesn't cause health problems. Because doctors don't really learn about nutrition in medical school at all. If they get anything, and that's only if they're more recent medical school graduates, they might get a one semester, one class on something about nutrition, but really they don't understand how it all works together. Every second, we have something like 220 functions that are happening in our body through the minerals and the vitamins and the phytonutrients that are happening. All of these things are taking place all the time in our body, but they're not taught about in medical school. Mm-hmm. They might have one class on orthomolecular studies, which is vitamins and stuff.
Right. I just want you to say that one more time, just so people can let that sink in, because that is such a frustration for me. And no disrespect to the medical field. I mean, it is an amazing field.
If I get hit by a car, take me to the nearest emergency room, put me back together, please. That's where they really shine, is acute injuries.
Yes. That's excellent.
But where they fail is chronic conditions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just posted on my Facebook yesterday a response I had from a client who has been working with GI doctors for 12 years and with all of her issues. And she showed me some of her labs last month, and I was like, you know what? I think you need to take magnesium. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, magnesium. 3 days of magnesium. And for the first time in 11 years, she had formed stools. In 11 years. She's like 12 years of working with GI docs. No one has recommended magnesium. She calls me her witch doctor. I love it.
Okay. So if we were to start taking, not everybody's going to be able to go out and get this test right away. So do you have recommendations for what people can start looking at within their home? What are maybe the top 3 things that you notice, whether it be ingredients or foods that you notice most people are reactive to?
Yep. In fact, I have a handout that everybody is welcome to go get. If they go to multiplesclerosisdiet.com, then they'll get my top 3 items that I recommend anybody with any kind of chronic condition start looking to avoid. And they include, I did a whole TED talk on this in 2014.
Okay.
And they include things like artificial colors and artificial flavors. But even what's become more and more apparent lately is this huge loophole called natural flavors. So you might see like a mineral or a carbonated water with a little flavor in it, right? And you're like, oh, this is such a great alternative to soda pop. I'm going to have this carbonated water. It's just water with a little flavor. There's like no calories, there's nothing. What a better solution. Except for the loophole is anything that's called natural flavors can be a huge chemical stew, and they don't have to divulge it. So you have no idea what's in it. And like for me, when I have natural flavors, my eyelids start to peel.
That's interesting.
And natural flavors are often related to MSG. So if you have an MSG sensitivity, and a lot of people do, and MSG is a GMO and an extract of a lot of things, and natural flavors fall under that MSG category. But they're in a loophole. They're allowed to be put in organic foods, all sorts of things.
Okay. I'm realizing now that the coffee creamer that I like to use in the morning has to go. I always thought, because I always look at my ingredients, and this one has, I think, 3 ingredients, not much. And it does have natural flavors. And I was like, but maybe it's the, what is it that they always say? The beaver, is it the beaver that they talk about? I can't think of what it's called, where it's gross, whatever it is.
You mean the
gland,
the flavoring that comes from the beaver?
Yes.
The beaver glands.
Yes. So I always
think milk the beavers.
Basically, yes. So I always thought, okay, maybe it's that. That can't be that bad for you if it came. But now that you said that, I'm realizing that I really need to get rid of this.
Well, it depends. Some people have if your tolerance threshold is higher, like I would say 70% of the population are not necessarily in chronic ailments. They can tolerate this maybe up until a certain extent, a certain age, when their body says that's enough. I'm full. My tolerance threshold is full. I'm going to start tipping over into symptoms. Where other people like your son and my son tip over in childhood and start reacting in childhood and manifesting that. I used to have almond milk, vanilla almond milk in my coffee in the mornings. And then I realized every afternoon I'd kind of have this weird little headache, like right here. And it wasn't debilitating. I didn't have to go lie down or anything, but I was just like, it just made me feel not great in the afternoon. I'm like, what is that? I couldn't figure it out. And then I went away on vacation and I came back and I had my regular vanilla almond milk. And at 2:00, I had that little headache right there. And I'm like, it's the vanilla in the almond milk. And it was, and now it kills me because I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll say, I want a decaf coffee with almond milk. And they'll pull out a vanilla almond milk. And I'm like, no, I can't, no vanilla, because that's fake vanilla.
Right.
I can't have that. I can do real vanilla.
Right.
But that's not what they're putting in our products.
No. That makes me realize how important it is for us. You always hear, like, if you're dealing with any sort of chronic issue or even just like a minor issue, start journaling, food journaling, and how important it is for us truly to start being very cognizant of how we feel after the foods that we are eating.
Yes. And it can be really hard to do that because if you can think about all the different ingredients that you have in one day, there's just a lot. And if we just look at, say, a normal person's daily routine, so you might have the coffee. So the coffee has coffee beans and caffeine. Those are two separate elements. A lot of people might be like, I'm very sensitive to caffeine, but I can have decaf coffee.
Okay.
You might put a sweetener in that. You might put a milky thing in that. So right now we have like at least four things that we're looking at. Then let's say you have a muffin. Okay. So that muffin might have wheat and oats or bran or banana or, and then sugar and maybe yeast and maybe cranberries or something like that. So there's probably at least 15 ingredients in that muffin. Now let's go on to lunch, right? And like, okay, well, how many different, even if you have a salad, how many different ingredients are in your salad? Let's say there's 6 items in your salad, and then in your salad dressing, there's another 6 items in there. So now you're not even done with your day. There's at least 40 different ingredients that could have been causing your problems.
And if you're I was going to say, and if you're eating the standard American diet, how many more of those are things that you don't even realize
that are in your processed foods?
Yeah.
Exactly. They don't have to tell you.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have to tell you. So yes, the idea of what I do in LEAP therapy is to reduce the variables. So we eliminate any variable that we don't know for sure is safe for you and keep you on a diet that we know 100% every single thing that goes in your mouth is not inflammatory for you because we have the test results.
Okay. And if someone goes through the LEAP program, what are some things that they may notice, like especially those who suffer with MS? Is there going to be a 100% turnaround, or what do you usually say will?
So what I promise, what I guarantee is that if you have inflammation in your body and we reduce that inflammation, you're going to feel better. That's the guarantee.
Right.
That's just logic.
Right.
What if you have something like MS, where what you might be able to reverse is debatable because it depends on where the scar is in your brain and the damage that's already been done. The sooner you can do this in the terms of a course of a disease, the better, before you have a lot of damage already done that may or may not reverse. Some of it might, some of it won't. But in general, everybody, MS or not, will experience increased energy, better sleep, better outlook on life, more optimism. It's almost like the world gets into technicolor instead of, and you didn't even realize that your colors were kind of faded. And then all of a sudden the world is more vibrant and bright because all this inflammation is moving out of your body, and it affects, as I said, everywhere. It affects your brain, it affects your thinking, it affects your moods, it affects your emotions, it affects your mental health. Inflammation is indicted in depression, and depression and multiple sclerosis, and depression and heart disease, depression and cancer, they all go hand in hand because those are all inflammatory issues.
Right. So can you tell me about your program? You've mentioned it. You do the MRT.
Yes.
Testing.
Yes. That's
so
the
talk me
centerpiece.
through.
Okay. So when somebody comes to work with me, the first thing that happens is we have a conversation. I'll just reach down and grab my plug here. Is we have a conversation about their health history and determine, are they a good candidate? Is there inflammation in their body?
Okay.
And are they willing to put in some effort? This is not just popping a pill or getting a shot from somebody. This is you. I am empowering you to reclaim your health. So if that all happens and they decide that they're a good candidate to work with me, then I send them out a welcome kit, and it contains all of their materials that they need to move forward. So the first step is they start on an herbal parasite protocol. That's a 30-day protocol, but they start off on it. And as soon as they get at least 2 weeks into the protocol or so, then they can get their blood drawn for the MRT test.
Okay.
we just want to, again, level the playing field. We want to clear out any buggers that might hinder improvement in their health. And then the third part is they collect their urine for 24 hours, and then that gets FedExed out to the lab. And when those results come back, that tells us what we need to supplement them with in order to help them achieve complete digestion and start assimilating and absorbing their nutrients.
Okay.
That's the whole thing. It's a
4-month
program.
Okay.
We have regularly scheduled Zoom appointments with me as I walk you through the whole thing. And on top of it, I have this online portal, which is this treasure trove of over 100 recipes that are all adaptable, so that if say rice is, again, one of your safe foods, you can go into the portal and you can go into the recipe section and search for rice. And there's breads that you can make from rice flour, and there's pancakes that you can make from rice flour, and there's muffins that you can make from rice flour, and all sorts of different ways that you can introduce the safe foods, the safe ingredients for you, and still enjoy your life. There's cakes and cookies, and I don't want you to feel deprived when you go through this. I want you to eat as much as you want to eat, but only of the foods I tell you you can.
Okay. Perfect.
It's a restricted diet. And then after 2 weeks, it starts to expand, because within those first 2 weeks, inflammation is moving out of your body. A lot of things will be happening. And by the end of those first 2 weeks, most people feel very different.
Okay. So when you mentioned the XYZ, you start with the XYZ. So then after those 2 weeks, do you then go back, or depending on the body?
So then we design a customized reintegration program where we start with, okay, so we're going to reintroduce one new food a day, and we're going to, again, start at the bottom of the alphabet. So now T is tomorrow, and then U is the day after that, and then S is the day after that. And I tell you and teach you how to keep one of those, an effective food journal. And what we do is I don't want you to record everything you're eating, or say, I had 1 cup of cereal or whatever it is. I don't care about quantities at all. We're not looking at macronutrients. We're not looking at quantities, because honestly, 1 drop of something like red food dye is enough to make someone react. But I want to know which foods are new, because if we have you at a baseline, again, we want to reduce the variables. So if we have you at a baseline after 2 weeks, which we pretty much do, then all the foods you've been eating in these first 2 weeks, those become your baseline. And so I don't need to know if you ate the food that we've already decided is safe for you. I need to know, did you eat a new food? And if so, what time of day? And then, did you have a symptom? And if so, what time of day? So you might put in your food journal, I ate asparagus today at 12 p.m. and at 4 p.m. I had diarrhea.
Okay.
Or I woke up this morning with a migraine. Okay, well, now let's look back at the foods that you've eaten, the new foods that you've introduced for the last 4 days, because food sensitivities can take up to 4 days to manifest. So for instance, for my son, who was my guinea pig, I know that if he eats red food dye, he will vomit in 20 minutes. But if he holds it down, then in 7 hours, he has a major personality shift and he becomes an evil, evil person. 45 minutes after that, he will break down in tears and he'll say, I couldn't help. I couldn't stop myself. I heard you telling me to stop myself. I wanted to stop, but it's a chemical reaction that's happening in his body.
Right.
So when we look at like child rearing in terms of escalating consequences, for my son, that meant nothing, because he was in the throes of a chemical reaction and he'd be like, bring it on, give me more consequence. I don't care, because he can't think clearly, because when your brain is inflamed, you cannot think clearly.
Right.
It's just like in PMS. We know that we're puffy and we're retaining fluid and we're inflamed when we're PMS, and then we get moody and teary and all of these things, and not logical and rational.
Right.
And that's because the brain is inflamed. I know that if my son is constipated, it's not something he ate today or yesterday. It's something he ate the day before yesterday.
Okay.
And that if he hasn't been continuing to eat that in the meantime, that tomorrow he'll be fine. I don't have to give him any type of laxative or anything like that. It'll work itself out because the inflammation in his colon will recede.
Okay.
I know if he has a migraine, it's something he ate probably anywhere from 10 to 12 hours before. And vertigo, same thing. And so it's funny. Now he's in college. So he came home for college last week. It was his birthday. And we went out for dinner and we were at a sushi place. And I looked over at him and I saw him pouring out the soy sauce. And I'm like, what are you doing? You shouldn't be eating the soy sauce. Oh, Mom, I eat it all the time at school. I'm fine. I'm like, well, maybe that's why you say you're having a migraine once a week at school. And he's like, no, that's not it. Well, so he's sleeping at home. And the next morning he wakes up and he's throwing up and he's having vertigo and a migraine. And I'm like, I told you not to eat that soy sauce. And I'm like, you need to take this with you. You know, I can't control him anymore. He's 19. He has to learn how to control himself. And oftentimes that takes experiential learning.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Thank you so much. Where can we find you and learn more from you?
So the best place where everything is housed for me is at my website, ElizabethYarnell.com.
Okay.
And then if you're interested in talking with me, just go ahead on my website at the bottom of every page, it says book a naturopathic health assessment. And that's a complimentary visit or Zoom call. Everything is virtual in my world. I work, as I said, with anyone in North America. As long as you can FedEx to Florida overnight, you can work with me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, Courtney, this was really fun. Thank you so much for bringing me in.
Yes, of course. Was there anything you wanted to add?
One of the things I like to remember is that good health is our birthright, and no one should have to suffer needlessly. And if there's someone who has been to every doctor and tried every medication and still suffering, you're a good candidate to come work with me for this approach. And all we do is we're going to change what you eat. We're not going to do any pharmaceuticals. It's not going to affect anything that you're already taking. I'm not going to ask you to get off your meds or anything like that. That's all between you and your doctor. We're just going to talk about your food. Non-threatening.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yes. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to our podcast. I hope you found this information valuable and hope that you are able to immediately use some of the information that was provided. Make sure to check out the show notes for all the links that we discussed today. I also wanted to let you know that if you are a mom who is wanting to begin to start making healthier choices, but are not sure where to start or don't feel like you have a lot of time, I want to let you know that I offer a 5-day challenge that is free for you to get started on making small changes each day. It provides you with a quick 5-minute movement or workout routine, along with a 5-day meal plan with family-friendly meals you will enjoy, and a tip that will help you to find ways to move and live healthier. Just head to formfitnaples.com/fit5 to sign up. Again, that information will be in our show notes, so just head there, click on that link, and you'll be able to get started with the 5-day challenge immediately. Now make sure to go out and enjoy your day while practicing small, healthy choices that will make lasting changes.